Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. What do those words mean? Well, they mean a lot of things. At its basic, it represents the approximately 6 block area where, let's see, where's the good picture of it? Let's see, does this have, yeah, this will have, no, no, it's this one, yeah. 6 block zone of Seattle, right in the heart of downtown, essentially, which has been seized from the city by protesters and activists. It is a zone that is, for all intents and purposes, outside of the control of the city of Seattle government and the state of Washington government and the federal government of the United States. Now, obviously, this will only last as long as the military chooses not to roll tanks in or what have you. They have repurposed barricades to prevent cars from driving in, and they are apparently patrolling the perimeter like like an area under siege, which is essentially what it is. But let's get into the history of it. Back on the 28th of May, the protests in Seattle reached. I'm not sure exactly when the protests began in Seattle, but in the 28th is when things really started to heat up. And particularly Friday the 29th, uh, I guess it looks like things began on Friday the 29th. Saturday the 30th, the rioting increased with tear gas, rubber bullets, pepper balls, all sorts of good shit flying into the rioters, into the protesters. But the protesters kept coming. They stayed and kept coming back. Over the following week, from Saturday the 30th till uh, June 8th, there was a lot of clashes between police and protesters. Until finally, on June 9th, just a few days ago, the city government announced that they were withdrawing police from what is now known as the CHAZ, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, from the from specifically the third precinct, which is located inside the zone. This is where most of the harshest fighting was taking place. Now, the interesting thing that I have found is that apparently the police set up sort of a preemptive campaign of uh, of misinformation. They claimed that there was credible rumors that they were going to set the precinct on fire, that there was going to be arson in the area, and they boarded up the windows and left pallets nearby to ostensibly to protect the precinct. So what have they done with the precinct? Not much. They have spray painted over the, and yes, regime occupied Safeway police hold up here. This is probably the best meme to come out of here. Let's see. Does this have a picture of it? I've been through so many different pages. Let's see. They've painted over the sign on the police precinct so that it says Seattle People's Department instead of Police Department, as you would expect. That's some fucking based shit right there. And there's been a lot of talk about turning it into a community center, which kind of brings up the question of what is going to happen to the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone in the future. Right now, it is a fairly isolated, um, what's the word I'm looking for here? It's a more or less. I'm not sure how self sufficient it is, uh, because obviously there's probably not a lot of growing space in the area, despite the fact that it actually is largely a park. Um, I'm not sure why, but Cal Anderson Park here is considered part of the zone to most people. Most of it is centered around here, the 12th and Pike, or Pine. I keep saying Pike or Pine, whatever. The 12th and Pine intersection here. This is where uh, a lot of the community centers, community activities are taking place. Things like free food and water. Uh, the they've put on like they've done community theater, uh, showing movies like a political movie called 13th, which is about a history of racism in America. They've done lectures and teach-ins, I believe they're called, where anyone can join and listen to someone teaching them. That's not to say that there's no commerce. There's actually quite a bit of commerce still in the area. The businesses in the area are still functioning. Uh, in conjunction with the activists and protesters in the area. A lot of things are free, but the businesses are still there to operate and they take US currency. So, what has been the reaction outside of it? Well, hilariously, Jay Inslee, the governor of Washington, is apparently completely ignorant of what's going on, or at least he was yesterday.
You about what's going on in Seattle. There's this thing called the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. What's your thought on that? The fact that the protesters have taken that over and not allowing people to come and go freely?
Completely apropos of nothing, this dude looks like he is absolutely bopping at his job over here. Like he's dancing and shit while he's uh, translating for the hearing impaired, which, hey, more power to him.
Regarding the guard.
Well, that's news to me, so I'll have to reserve any comment about it. I have not heard anything about that from any credible source. Not that you're not credible, it's just like before I espouse an opinion, I should know of which I speak.
Yeah, as far as the National Guard, how long are you going to keep them there? And if there is a takeover of a street in Seattle where they're barricading, keeping people out, the protesters are, would you want the Guard to be involved?
That's a hypothetical. Look, we've got to have safety. I'm sure that people will find a way to have public safety everywhere in the state. I'm confident of that. The National Guard is demobilizing. Over two-thirds of them were demobilized of yesterday. I don't know if they're completely demobilized at this point or not, but if not, that'll be shortly, I believe.
So Jay Inslee has apparently was completely unaware of it. I'm more inclined to believe that this is willful, that he is taking a hands-off approach and doesn't want to say anything about it. He did it in the absolute dumbest way possible by claiming he hadn't heard of it, but yeah, I noticed that and turned it back up. But basically, he said he'd never heard of it, which is great. There are actually a couple of precedents in Seattle for what could happen. One is an area called El Centro de la Raza on Beacon Hill in Seattle, which back in the 70s was an empty school building, was seized by a number of activists, mostly Latino, but it was actually something of a rainbow coalition, so to speak, of white and brown people who seized the building, held it for 3 months while protesters staged demonstrations, until finally the Seattle School District agreed, and the city of Seattle, of course, agreed to lease the property to this organization, El Centro de la Raza, for $1 a year, essentially a nominal rent to make it official or what have you. This lasted up until 1997, when the school district insisted on fair market rates, and rent rose to $12,000 a month. By 99, they owed $150,000 in back rent, but grants from the city of Seattle and Washington State allowed El Centro to buy the site from the school district. Now, this is not exactly what we're looking for. This is, even today, something of a gentrified community center. It's certainly better than some other places, but it's still largely a high end, from what I've been able to research, largely somewhat gentrified, bougie community center. More recently, there was Africa Town. November 12th of 2013, so less than 7 years ago, a group of mostly black protesters seized a Horace Mann school building in the Central District and basically were trying to agitate for better educational programs for the African American population in Seattle. Like in many places, even in the anti-slavery North, segregation and separate schooling facilities are still very much a thing. And these people were trying to bring this to the attention of the public at large, and particularly the school district and city government, to try to rectify it. Unfortunately, the police claimed they had received reports of the building being wired to explode, and there was a sniper on the roof willing to shoot. None of those things were real. I think I want to distance myself from your rhetoric, making a distinction between good community centers and gentrified bougie. Is there a text you've read that makes the case for the importance of this distinction? Not a text as such, just the and I could very well be wrong about the Centro de la Raza. Let me. This is about the strange. This is. So. Activists connected with Seattle's Latino community entered the abandoned Beacon Hill school, claimed it, and began making demands. Okay. Yeah, the Rainbow Movement. Current Housing and Economic Development Director of El Centro de la Raza explained that his organization decided to build Plaza Roberto Maestas when in 2003. Okay. South China is the most diverse bar in the city. Transit designed the local architecture. Okay, I apparently didn't read this part. It actually is some decent, um, affordable rents. 465 for a one-bedroom apartment. Beacon Hill costs 900 to 1,000. Okay, I retract my previous statements. This seems to be a good, better than I was originally led to believe. I apologize for that. Right. Cafe of the Station moved into a space on the southeast corner of the plaza. The cafe, which now serves wine and food, faces the light rail station and its 4 elevators to transport people. Okay. Buy a cup of iced tea, meet the owner of the station. He has to be one of the most fascinating figures in the city. He's a Mexican American businessman, a Black Lives Matter activist, supporter of radical leftist politics. Local hip hop festival, the Block Party at the station, which happens this weekend. Usually moves his business from across the street into Plaza Roberto Maestas. Okay, I think it was just that it's basically run by like land developers and those kind of people. But that's my fault. I didn't look into it deep enough. My apologies. Can hold 650 people. Yeah. So yeah, this should definitely be the kind of thing that the CHAZ. The difference is, of course, that the autonomous zone is in the middle of a pretty important section of uh, the city as far as commerce is concerned. The city could turn over an abandoned school building and the area around it to protesters, to the occupiers, in order to uh, to keep things from escalating out of control and not lose much. Now, I have no what's the word I'm looking for here? Delusions that this will last long term. Unless Trump really gets itchy, as he's already said he wants he if Durkin, the mayor of Seattle, doesn't shut down the autonomous zone, he will. Now, what exactly that means is anyone's fucking guess, especially with Trump. Probably means sending in the aforementioned tanks because he uh he can't very well nuke the heart of Seattle, although I'm sure he would if he thought he could get away with it. This is definitely going to be some interesting stuff. They've already made demands of the city to disperse peacefully. The first of which, and again, it has to be stated that whenever you're in a negotiating position, and make no mistake, unless the U.S. government or the Seattle government or the Washington state government is willing to deal with the political fallout of the videos going up of military personnel storming into a peaceful commune and shooting everyone who doesn't leave immediately, they are in a bargaining position. You make demands for what you would get in a dream world. If you could dictate the outcome, this is what you would want to get. So that you can hopefully get something approaching it. You never know. You might get your dream. So the first demand, the Seattle Police Department and attached court system are beyond reform. We do not request reform, we demand abolition. We demand that the Seattle Council and the mayor defund and abolish the Seattle Police Department and the attached criminal justice apparatus. This means 100% of funding, including existing pensions for Seattle police. At an equal level of priority, we also demand that the city disallow the operations of ICE in Seattle. In the transitionary period between now and the dismantlement of the Seattle Police Department, we demand that the use of force be banned entirely. No guns, no batons, no riot shields, no chemical weapons, especially against those exercising their First Amendment rights as Americans to protest. We demand an end to the school-to-prison pipeline and the abolition of youth jails. Get kids out of prison, gets cops out of schools. We also demand the new youth prison being built in Seattle currently be repurposed. We demand that not the city government, nor the state government, but that the federal government launch a full-scale investigation into past and current cases of police brutality in Seattle and Washington, as well as the reopening of all closed cases reported to the Office of Police Accountability. In particular, we demand that cases particular to Seattle and Washington be reopened where no justice has been served, namely the cases of Iozia Falatago, Demarius Butts, Isaiah Obit, Tommy Lay, Sean Furr, and Charlena Lyles. I probably butchered at least 3 of those names, and I apologize. We demand reparations for victims of police brutality in a form to be determined. We demand that the city of Seattle make the names of officers involved in police brutality a matter of public record. Anonymity should not even be a privilege in public service. Yeah, definitely. I agree, Magmel. We demand a retrial of all people in color currently serving a prison sentence for violent crime by a jury of their peers in their community. This is an interesting one. I know that there's a great deal, also people in color is a weird typo, but I know there's a lot of procedural misconduct, prosecutorial misconduct, particularly when it comes to minorities. But yeah, I agree. There are probably a number of people in prison right now for either serving time for crimes that they didn't commit, or serving more time than they should for crimes they may have committed. We demand decriminalization of the acts of protest and amnesty for protesters generally, but specifically those involved in what has been termed the George Floyd Rebellion against the terrorist cell that previously occupied this area, known as the Seattle Police Department. Love the spinning around of the rhetoric. This includes the immediate release of all protesters currently being held in prison after the arrests made at 11th and Pine on Sunday night and early Saturday morning, June 7th and 8th, and any other protesters arrested in the past 2 weeks of the uprising. The name Evan Rija, in particular, comes to mind, who filmed Seattle police macing a young girl and is now in jail. Retrial demand is extremely interesting. I've never heard that type of articulation before. Neither had I until I was reading these. But yeah, I think that if you're demanding reform, I don't think anyone is seriously thinking that they can eliminate any kind of policing in Seattle. Looking into some community policing options, there definitely needs to be some sort of law enforcement in places just because people break laws. Now, the problem with our current system is that there are a number of laws which get very selectively enforced, and police are empowered to essentially do whatever they want to claim that someone broke a law. So, what they are asking for is a bottom-up reforming of the Seattle law enforcement system. So, yeah, this is Seems obvious as soon as you read it that the trials themselves, even given the existence of juries, would be racially biased. I guess my white privilege will literally prevent me from coming to that conclusion on my own. Yeah, exactly, Magmel. It's something that you don't think about unless someone basically puts it in front of you. We demand that the City of Seattle and the state government release any prisoner currently serving time for a marijuana-related offense and expunge the related conviction. Honestly, I can't believe it's taken this long and this kind of activity for that kind of thing to be proposed. Weed is legal in Washington State. The fact that there are still people in jail for marijuana-related offenses is offensive. We demand the City of Seattle and state government release any prisoner currently serving time just for resisting arrest if there are no other related charges, and that those convictions should also be expunged. We demand that prisoners currently serving time be given the full and unrestricted right to vote, and for Washington State to pass legislation specifically breaking from federal law that prevents felons from being able to vote. Absolutely. If you live in an area, even if it's in prison, you have a right as a human being and a citizen of these United States to vote on what is going to happen in that area. Yeah, you didn't know that, Magno? Yeah, if you're like at a traffic stop and you get belligerent and the cops decides you're being too shitty, they can arrest you. And if you resist that, yep. We demand an end to prosecutorial immunity for police officers in the time between now and the dissolution of the SPD and extant justice system. This is important. The fact that our police officers are functionally immune from the very law they're supposed to uphold is one of the grossest miscarriages of justice in our system anywhere in America right now. It's just disgusting. We demand the abolition of imprisonment, generally speaking, but especially the abolition of both youth prisons and privately owned for-profit prisons. Yes. Get rid of the for-profit prisons. That's just disgusting. Stop commodifying human beings. We demand, in replacement of the current criminal justice system, the creation of a restorative, transformative accountability programs as a replacement for imprisonment. I assume they'd at least write down some other charge. Why bother? There's no accountability. We demand autonomy be given to the people to create localized anti-crime systems. I agree with this in principle. However, I have an issue with this because there's a good chance that a lot of particularly gentrified areas in Seattle and elsewhere where people are trying to implement these kind of things, that what it would end up with is every racist white asshole in the neighborhood signing up to be part of the community watch and then harassing every person who's a half shade darker than them until they leave the neighborhood. Which is why I still don't agree with centralized, anti-crime systems. Localized anti-crime systems are good, but I think we need to create at least a state, if not national, standard for these anti-crime systems so that it doesn't just become another more of this. Basically a localized version of what we're dealing with all around. We demand that the Seattle Police Department, between now and the time of its abolition in the near future, empty its lost and found and return property owned by denizens of the city. Yeah, one of the things that I have heard about the when they seized the police precinct is that they destroyed a bunch of evidence. Like they broke into the evidence lockers and destroyed a bunch of evidence. So that should make, even if they, come in with tanks and tear gas and bullets and re-seize the area, there's going to be a lot of crimes that are just going to be dropped for lack of evidence. I also wonder how many drugs got redistributed around. We demand justice for those who have been sexually harassed or abused by the Seattle Police Department or prison guards in the state of Washington. I don't know if Washington is one of them, but there are 33 states where it's not illegal for a police officer to have sex with a prisoner, someone in their custody. You know, because there's no imbalance of power there at all. We demand that between now and the abolition of the SPD, that each and every SPD officer turn on their body cameras, and the body camera video of all Seattle police should be a matter of easily accessible public record. How difficult do you think it'd be to have every SPD officer's body camera streamed to a site like Twitch? Obviously, I'm not saying that they should load up Twitch's servers with it. I think that they should create their own website where you can easily see uh, the stream, because maybe the data infrastructure isn't quite there yet, but I don't know. I think that'd be. Oh no, not the evidence. I know it'd be child's play to like create the website to do it. I'm just wondering about the network infrastructure. We demand that the funding previously used for the Seattle Police be redirected into socialized health and medicine for the city of Seattle, free public housing, because housing is a right, not a privilege, public education to decrease the average class size in city schools and increase teacher salary, naturalization services for immigrants to the United States living here undocumented. We demand they be called undocumented because no person is illegal, general community development, parks, etc. We also have economic demands that must be met. We demand the degentrification of Seattle, starting with rent control. We demand the restoration of city funding for arts and culture to reestablish the once rich local cultural identity of Seattle. We demand free college for the people of the state of Washington due to the overwhelming effect that education has on economic success and the correlated overwhelming impact of poverty on people of color as a form of reparations for the treatment of black people in the state and country. We demand that between now and the abolition of the SPD, that Seattle police be prohibited from performing homeless sweeps that displace and disturb our homeless neighbors, and on equal footing, we demand an end to all evictions. We demand a decentralized election process to give the citizens of Seattle a greater ability to select candidates for public office, such that we are not forced to choose at the poll between equally undesirable options. There are multiple systems and policies in place which make it impractical at best for working class people to run for public office, all of which must go, starting with any fees associated with applying to run for public office. Now, this is an interesting one, and not something I had thought about. I know that, a month or two ago, Joshua Collins went and was basically saying on Twitter that he wouldn't have the money, or they wouldn't be able to reach their signature goal to get on the ballot. So they were going to pay like a $1,200 or $1,500 fee to get on the ballot, which basically tells you two things. One, there are essentially two ways to get on the ballot: either pay a fee or get enough signatures. Now, one of those requires the money to pay the fee, and like I said, it was like $1,200 or $1,500. It wasn't a huge amount of money, but not the kind of money that most working class people can throw around. And the other is to get signatures. And the problem is that it takes a lot of time to get signatures. A lot of time. So again, not the kind of thing working class people can do because they gotta work. So yeah, I definitely agree with all of these so far, obviously. Related to economic demands, we also have demands pertaining to what we would formally call health and human services. We demand the hospitals and care facilities of Seattle employ black doctors and nurses specifically to help care for black patients. We demand the people of Seattle seek out and proudly support black-owned businesses. Your money is our power and sustainability. We demand that the city create an entirely separate system staffed by mental health experts to respond to 911 calls pertaining to mental health crises, and insist that all involved in such a program be put through thorough, rigorous training and conflict de-escalation. Finally, let us now address our demands regarding the education system in the city of Seattle and state of Washington. We demand that the history of Black and Native Americans be given a significantly greater focus in the Washington state education curriculum. We demand that thorough anti-bias training become a legal requirement for all jobs in the education system, as well as in the medical profession and in mass media. We demand the City of Seattle and State of Washington remove any and all monuments dedicated to historical figures of the Confederacy whose treasonous attempts to build an America with slavery as a permanent fixture were an affront to the human race. Yeah. That's something a lot of people don't seem to realize, that most of the Confederate statues were put up in this century. Well, not this century, the 20th century. So, yeah. Let's see. Does it have? This doesn't list when they were put up. But I remember seeing. Yeah, this should be. Yeah, here we go. So remember that the Confederacy ended in 1865. There was no, aside from a few, several, I should say, holdouts in the South calling it the Lost Cause or what have you. The Confederacy ended in 1865. So we have the Civil War. There's a total of, I believe schools, monuments on courthouse grounds, other sites including monuments. So there's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 monuments put up in 1865. 6 monuments in 1866. And then a handful throughout the 19th century, really getting into it in 1890. And then look at this. 1900 to 1920, and then it kind of falls off. There's still a lot, but it falls off through the 40s, 50s, and then another spike in the 60s. What happened in the 60s? Hey, Antifa General. And still more have gone up over the last 40 years. But this is the secret that no one wants to talk about. How many statues went up? And essentially, every time there was some sort of push for equality or parity for the. You can fuck right off, Anderson Cooper. Any kind of equality or parity movement for particularly black people, Confederates put up a monument. Remember, the early 20th century was the progressive era. There were a lot of moves towards making greater equality, trust busting, a lot of anarchist movements, that kind of thing that would have sought to create more equity and a parity for minorities, particularly black people. And then, of course, the civil rights, all of these. So when people say that these statues are our history or what have you, Antifa General, none of that here, thanks. So yeah, this is so when we talk about wanting to remove Confederate statues, these aren't statues that were put up, 150 years ago. A lot of these, as you can see here, were put up in my lifetime. Here, I was born in 87, so right about here, all of these have gone up in my lifetime. So let's go back to the Medium article. There we go. So all monuments dedicated to historical figures of the Confederacy, yeah. That should just be nationwide. I mean, the fact that the NFL and fucking NASCAR have decided to ban the Confederate flag. I mean, the zeitgeist has shifted when fucking NASCAR has banned the Confederate flag. Like, the only flag more popular at a NASCAR rally than the checkered NASCAR flag is the Confederate flag. So that is huge. And same with NFL. And apparently, Goodell has admitted that the police have, or that the NFL was wrong to condemn the protesters, like Kaepernick, who took a knee in his games. So people saying that the protesters have done nothing seems like we're making changes all over. So there are two, I kind of already alluded to this, but there are essentially two possible outcomes for the zone. One, I've already said, roll in with tanks, guns, what have you, and liberate the CHAZ. The other is institutionalization. Now, as I've already pointed out, Seattle itself has a history of allowing institutionalization. And I think that there may be Durkin may be moving towards doing that with the CHAZ. It remains to be seen how much will be institutionalized. As I said, there's a lot of businesses and whatnot down there. But one of the big things is turning the Seattle Police Department East Precinct into a community center. Don't give it back to the cops. Make it a community center where kids can go and play sports and games and meet people and have friends and whatnot and enjoy themselves that way. That is, I think, a really good idea. This is a really exciting situation, a really interesting thing, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. Because this kind of large occupation is something we've only seen a few times in history. The biggest one that everyone knows about is the Paris Commune, which lasted about 2 months and was overrun by the military. I think it was a combination of French and other militaries, and took back the Paris Commune. But we're in a different time now. If the military rolls into the CHAZ, it's going to be filmed. It's going to be streamed live. We're going to see it happen. And while there are a number of people, I'm sure, who will be happy to see these filthy anarchists taken to task, We'll see if that's the route they go. It really depends on what happens basically in the next couple of weeks. I think that's really if things stay peaceful as they have been. Yeah, I don't know what Antifa General is talking about. If things stay peaceful as they have been since the police withdrew, there's been no rioting, there's been no looting. There's been peaceful commerce and education and community within the CHAZ. If that continues, as it should, then it's going to be a lot harder for the military and the government to justify coming in with guns and bombs and tanks to take it back, especially when it gets broadcast live. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Our best weapon, our strongest weapon, is the high definition digital camera connected to an internet, connected to the entire rest of the world that is in almost everyone's pockets these days. They give us the tools to film oppression. Think about it. Do you think this is the first time protesters have been met with tear gas, rubber bullets, and batons? The first time that protesters have been run over in the streets by police? Hell no. It's been going on since rubber bullets and tear gas were invented. But now we have the means to record it. We have the means to put it out live on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat and what have you. We can make TikToks about it, showing these brutalities. We can take their official statements and splice in these videos like the let's see if I can find the video. There was. See, I'm trying to remember. Was it? Rubber bullet kisses service with a smile. Exactly. Let's see, did Surus? No, it was. There's a supercut of the a bunch of let's see. Let's see. Basically the NYPD, let's see if that finds it, released a statement saying that they were being attacked and not receiving the support, and someone spliced in footage of the NYPD and other police departments attacking rioters. So, what do we think of that? Wish I could find it now. Yeah, it's not. I'm not gonna find it here. So yeah, Trump, of course, weighing in. These ugly anarchists must be stooped. Immediately move fast. Radical left Governor Jay Inslee. I love how anyone to his left is radical left. Also, I just want to point out that this article right here is by Jason Rance, and he helpfully included one of his own tweets. So, quoting Tucker Carlson, which is great. So yeah, this is a very interesting situation. I'm excited to look to see what happens. It could be the beginning of a major change. Finally, we have evidence, video, testimonial, whatever evidence you need to show that the police, the National Guard, the US government is not infallible. They're not invincible. All it takes is enough dedicated people willing to go out and soak up the damage long enough for them to decide it's not worth it. It's how you win asymmetrical warfare. You make it so that it's more expensive for them to continue prosecuting the fight than for them to capitulate and make changes. This isn't over. There will still be protests, there will still be actions. This is not by no means over. This is only the beginning. What a hell of a beginning it is. Hey, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the show. Remember to like, share, and leave a comment because it helps me. Subscribe and ring that bell to help you. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.